Hey, it's Jonathan Goldhill here, author of The Disruptive Successor and a business coach with the Goldhill Group.
And what's your best advice, John? What's the best advice you ever got from anybody?
Phil, best advice is that if you're going to grow a business, you need a playbook and a mentor.
Ooh, a playbook and a mentor.
Yeah,
So did you have these when you started your business, or did you learn
absolutely not.
this?
I had no
No, come
idea.
on.
No, I had no idea. And that's why I made a lot of mistakes in my business. I mean, people back 30 years ago said, you need a business plan. And I thought, I know how to put together a business plan, and I put together a business plan, and that was kind of like a vision document of where I wanted to go, but it wasn't a playbook about how to run a business. And
Ah,
it really wasn't until I started hanging around other business coaches and business coaches who really were really experts in their field. I called them mentors earlier in the show, but I'm saying these were people who really knew that if you're going to scale a business, or if you're going to have an enjoyable journey owning a small business, you need some kind of a playbook that you run your business by, and it's kind of like a software system, Phil, for running your business.
that's
Yeah.
interesting. So
Mhm.
so different than a business plan
Yes.
is a playbook. So
Yep.
so do you? Okay, so let's break that down. Do we need a business plan, or
Yes.
do we need a?
The,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
business plan is part of the playbook. We have to know where we're going. We have to have a vision for it. We have to be able to share that vision. We have to have it talk in terms of numbers. We have to talk in terms of, who our customer is and who our ideal customer is. It has to talk in terms of the employee experience and, has to engage in that stuff. We have to have a whole lot about marketing. How do we reach our ideal client profile? What is the messaging? What's the medium? And then the operations and the record keeping or finances. Like, what are we going for? How are we going to manage getting that? And so that's just part of the playbook is the plan.
Wow. Wow. So that's a lot already. And a lot of
Yeah.
people now they think, right, I've got a website. I'm in business now. Yeah, you're laughing.
That's
So
a,
what do you
yeah.
say to that?
That's like, oh yeah, okay. That's like having a piece of marketing literature and going into someone's office and dropping it off and walking out the door. I mean, was that a very effective sales call? I don't think so. So, a website, is it going to drive traffic by itself? I mean, if you're going to have a website and you're going to rely on business coming solely through that website, well, then you better have a front end marketing engine, whether it's email list, email newsletters, social media, SEO. I mean, you've got to drive traffic to that website. And then once you have a website, like, what's the compelling offer or action that you want your prospect to take once they land on that website? So yeah, I mean, just having a website is just like that's like just having like a hammer in your tool belt. It doesn't do everything. The hammer.
No. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So John, let's take us back, man. When you were starting out here and you found those coaches and you found that you developed this playbook, like how did you sift and sort through the noise that's out there with all the number of coaches to find someone that you trusted that you wanted to invest your time and your energy with?
That's a really good question, Phil. So, when I first got into coaching, I joined a franchise actually. And I found that that's where I learned the idea that business isn't just a whole bunch of disparate ideas and concepts that you put together, that there actually was an order and a sequence to certain things. And so, when I first started my coaching journey, I realized that, and I didn't call it a playbook that back then, but that you needed some kind of a framework for how to see a business. As I started to evolve, and then I got into, well, there's an organization called Scaling Up, and I joined them. And then I started reading the books by the EOS organization, Entrepreneurial Operating System, Traction being their primary book. Those two books really gave me the idea that you need a playbook to run your business. And that when you understand that the playbook covers strategy, people, execution, cash management, leadership, when it covers the major disciplines in your business, then you've got some kind of an operating system that everyone can get on the same page and understand, okay, this is how we do things around here, and this is why we do it, And, this is the reference manual. Does that make
Okay, so
sense?
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense, but I don't have an employee, let's say.
Okay.
What does the playbook help us with? How does it help us grow and get to the point where we can have some employees, where we can have some scalability?
Well, so one thing in the playbook for me is the importance of practicing the 80/20 principle. In EOS, they call it delegate and elevate. In scaling up, they call it love and loathe. In the original coaching system that I joined, they called it the vital few and trivial many. If you're going to scale beyond yourself, then you have to start to recognize what is your zone of genius. What are the things that you do that you love doing, that you'll do all day long given the chance, and that you are great at? And you need to learn to strip away those other things that are extraneous and start finding other people to do those things, right? The whole thing started in my mind when I read the book The E-Myth. It's probably the most popular business selling book in all these, among all these books. Probably more popular than Good to Great, more popular than, you know, whatever the tipping point or whatever your business book of choice is, because it really spoke to the small business person who and said, you can't be in the story of the book is the pie shop. You can't make the pies, serve the pies, collect the money for the pies, and do everything that's required if you're going to really grow a pie shop business. And so important that if you're just one, to start to recognize what is it that you do really well, and what is it that you may be good at but not great at, don't love doing, and then certainly start with the things that you don't like, that you're not good at, and find someone who loves to do it and is great at, and surround yourself with people like that. And then take the stuff that you like and you're good at, and or like and but just get the stuff off your plate that isn't worthy of your time and your hourly rate, if you will. If you want to be making $200,000 a year, then your hourly rate is $100 an hour. If you're working 50 weeks, 40 hours a week, do the math.
Yeah.
Delegate everything below that
Yeah.
to somebody.
Yeah, so that makes a ton of sense, right? And I saw someone once say that we have $10 tasks, we have $100 tasks, and we have $10,000 tasks.
Yep.
And our goal is that we all have them, but the goal is to do more of those $10,000 tasks that we're uniquely
Yep.
qualified to do, and less of those $10 ones. So how do we, how do we find that tipping point, Jonathan, where we're like, okay, I'm stable now. I want to hire this first employee, or I finally am gonna, I'm gonna start delegating now. Can I do that before there's stability, or do I have to get stable first?
I think you can do it either way. It's an interesting question. I don't think it's ever been posed to me quite that way, but I think that you might not get the stability until you hire that person, because you'll always be juggling so many of those things that you're not that good at. So I think the tipping point is when you're putting in more time than you want to, and before you get burned out, right? If you're working too many hours, juggling too many things, then you're past the tipping point. What you need to do is sit down and document some of the procedures of things that you're good at, but you think you could find someone else who would be reasonably good at least maybe as good as you, and delegate that to somebody else. You delegate away some of those things, that'll free up your time. And then you might need some extra help hiring someone. Let's say you're not good at finance, you don't understand the numbers, the accounting stuff, it bores you. You know, finding someone who's good at it might be harder for you. You might need to solicit input from colleagues, friends, other business owners, business coaches, someone who understands what a good accountant might provide and what type of accountant you might need in your business. Um, so you might need some help in that, and that might take some extra time and money to do that. So first, figure out what you're pretty good at, but don't love doing, and that you could easily or comfortably have someone else do, and manage them doing that.
Awesome. That makes a lot of sense. And that taking that time, that pause to actually think about that and be deliberate about that, I think is the difference between spinning your wheels at some point and really getting that traction, to steal kind of Gino's word there, right? Where
Yep.
that's our
Hmm.
goal, is to get that traction so we can move forward a little faster than we could before. Now, with that, I know that you're an expert in family business, which is super interesting to me, because I have friends of mine that are in a family business, and often we have someone who's really good at business, and then we have someone who's kind of the golden child here, who doesn't help so much. So how do we balance that when we're in a family business and make it more successful and less painful?
Yeah. So you referred to Gino Wickman of EOS, and I think that their operating system is a great example of something that can be put into any business. And now the nuance of having family members involved in the business means that you need to have maybe more difficult conversations. Excuse me. You need to have conversations about certain business things in a different venue or different room, if you will. So there's a management meeting, and those are important, or a leadership meeting, and those are where you discuss leadership and management issues. But you don't discuss family conflict and family dynamics in those meeting rooms. You discuss your family issues and family conflict, and you discuss those maybe in the board of directors or in the owners or in the family room. And so some of those are personal and they need to be dealt with separately and personally. And I think that's where things get convoluted in family businesses, is that they mix family issues inside of the business issues, and they need to sort, or they need to separate those, sort them into different rooms, and have those conversations in different rooms. And I think in family businesses, because they tend to be more loyal to one another and to their employees, that uh, that a difficult conversation is when you need to talk to someone about something that is difficult for you to talk about, but where the stakes are really high. And you need to have a framework for how to have a difficult conversation. Oftentimes, I was just talking to someone today about how to have a difficult conversation with their employee, and what the framework would be, and following that framework. And these sometimes are more difficult conversations to have in family businesses because of the loyalty and the family ties.
Yeah, loyalty definitely gets in the way there, because we don't want to hurt each other's feelings, or we have some extra junk behind us that
Yep.
to your point, doesn't belong in that same room, in that same conversation, to make that work. So, do those? I mean, are those complementary though to the scale process, or are those completely different, John?
You mean the conversations, the
Yeah, the
communication?
conversations that we have here.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that they're complementary to having this standard business playbook, to the scaling up or EOS or my playbook from my book Disruptive Successor. They're complementary, but I think that these are important components that are not talked about in either of those books, to a large degree, which is some of the communication mechanisms, um, some of the structure behind having family meetings, and what the dialogue needs to be in those rooms. So super important, and not hard to put in place.
Yeah, not hard to put in place, but I would guess often, as you mentioned, right, very hard to execute, very hard to have those challenging conversations, because family is family, right? We have to have
Yep.
those. So, let's dive a little bit more into your book here, into
Yeah.
Disruptive Successor.
And let me just say
Yeah,
that's why I say a mentor and a playbook, because for many people have come to me because they've read one of these playbooks, and they say, hey, I don't really know, I don't know how to get it working, or we've tried it and it's not really working, or we don't really understand how to use this tool, um, or we're having trouble pushing this the information out to other people. So a mentor is really helpful. And I'm a big believer in coaches. Obviously, I'm also a big believer in therapy. I grew up having a mother as a family therapist. I really believe in the importance that sometimes a third party can help to facilitate these conversations, Phil. I mean, I have an example. I have a client who's been working through um, what I would call transfer of ownership and succession. Um, and there's really been no forward movement on the ownership transfer discussion until I came along. And when I came along, the things that I said were really no different than what my client was saying to her parent. But for some reason, he wasn't really hearing it. When now it's amazing how when a consultant shows up and says something that their internal employee or family member can say, that suddenly they hear it, but they weren't.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
anyway,
That
wanted to
that
interject
it.
that.
No, I think that's a really good point, right? About mentorship and about coaching or therapy or whatever you want to call it. That objective third party that's available to reflect back and to share it maybe in a different way. If you're coaching internally in an organization, you maybe call that a second or third voice, right? We
Hmm.
just you
Yep.
just need somebody else to do that, and I think that's super super important. So in your book and in this, you really have some of the unique issues that are covered to families, and I think that's really important. So one of them you talked about is communication. What else is there that is really that breaks that down? Is it lack of understanding or trust or empathy, or what is that, John? Give me a couple more.
In communication, I think
Yeah,
you hit the nail on the head. I think empathy is probably the most important thing. I think some of the tools that I've used that aren't in the book, some of them come out of actually marriage counseling, where you're literally talk to back. You let a person talk, and it's called imago. It comes from imago therapy, and the tool is basically letting someone speak their voice and the other person reflect or parrot back what they heard from that person. Uh, this actually, I think, comes from psychodrama in therapy, where someone is basically allowed to communicate what's on their mind, what's on their chest, what's bothering them, and make sure that they're heard by the other party. It's oftentimes used in marital counseling so that one person can really hear the other person, and that person can felt heard, like, I understand what it's like to be in your shoes. So I think that's basically all falls under the title of empathy, being able to understand and empathize with the other person. Super important communication as a tool. uh, you're asking me what other tools are important, am I right, in
yeah.
family businesses and in scaling up, um, that are unique to family businesses. And I really think that communication is probably the area where is the big area. But the other area is succession and ownership transition. These are difficult conversations because depending upon the personalities, and again, here's where empathy really plays a key part. Let's say you have a 40-year-old um, family member, child, who's working for their parent who's 65 or 70, let's say. Excuse me. And maybe the 70-year-old doesn't really want to let go of control. Maybe they think that they were really the entrepreneur, they're the driving force, and maybe they don't trust their child. You know, these are difficult conversations that need to be had in a very delicate way. Let's say you have someone who's 65, 70, wants their child to step up more, and they don't really know how to get them to step up. So, in other words, how do I develop a successor leader in my child? Um, or maybe you have what I call a disruptive successor. You have someone, let's say they're maybe even a little younger, maybe they're 25 or 30, and they have a lot of uh, what do we want to call it? I think we call it piss and vinegar, but they have
Ambition.
ambition. Let's call it nicely ambition. And the parent is a little uncomfortable with that ambition because look, everything's going really well. They've got the second home. They've got the beach house or the ski chalet, and they're doing pretty well. And like, are they going to let their child, what I call bet the farm? Are they going to let the child take a big bet? They're 25, 30. If they mess up, no big deal to them, but big deal to the 70, 60-year-old, parent who's basically doesn't want to risk their assets. And these are, again, conversations that need to be held around succession, around transfer of ownership. Because if you have an ambitious next generation leader, they're going to want to know, hey, not just what's my income, but like what's my ownership stake in this business? Because let's say I take this company from 2 million to 10 million and I'm driving it. I mean, I know I'm going to get a bigger salary, but the real payday comes maybe at the transfer of the sale of the business. And what's my stake in this? And this is where I find that I'm helpful with my clients is bridging those the gaps that exist between the family members and having these conversations and having them in either the family room or the ownership room or the board of directors room, wherever it's most appropriate. So I think that's unique and separate. You could have succession discussions, but typically that isn't popular in a non-family business.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Makes a ton of sense there, John. Thank you for sharing that. So with that, let's talk a little bit about evaluating people as we move into a little bit more tactical, practical stuff about about how we do this and how we scale. Right, we have to hire people. So how do we find those best people? Is there a special way that we need to evaluate, or do we look at past work, or how do you recommend we do this as we scale up?
Yeah. So I'm a pretty big fan of the top grading system, which was developed by Jeff Smart at GE. His son, or Jeff Smart, I'm sorry, is the son. Brad Smart is the top grading founder, but it was father and son that developed it together. So I like the two of their systems. One is the Who method. And basically, what these uh, um, are really well defined job descriptions where the productive output of the new hire, or maybe it's an internal hire, but if for that new position, are really well defined. So you not only are defining the productive outputs, but you're also defining the competencies, the attributes, and clearly it's so important if we're going to build an organization that's sticky. Cultural glue is there. They've got to match up with the core values. So at GE, they developed a two by two framework where they had core values on one axis and productivity on another axis. And then they literally plot their existing people. And if they don't plot well on the core values or on productivity, then they're basically get them out of the company. If they plot well on productivity but low on core values, then you need to warn and kind of coach them up. If they plot high on core values and low on productivity, you see if there's maybe a different seat that they should be sitting in, or you coach them to be more productive. But I think that getting back really to your question, you interview people as if you were looking 1 year back and saying, basically, could this person have accomplished the goals that we've set out for this particular position? And let's say we were sitting here a year from now and evaluating your performance, what would it look like? And I think you have to be really clear about what are the musts that you must have on the the necessary requirements. Um, so, a
Yeah.
simple example is I find people. I do a lot of work in the construction industry where they're hiring people who maybe are superintendents and project managers, and where their crew is not so bilingual. They're mostly Spanish speaking, and they'll tell me we found this great employee, but he doesn't really speak Spanish. And I'll look at them and say, well, but isn't that on your must have list? Like, how is he going to communicate and manage these people if he doesn't speak Spanish? And so you have to be really clear about what's on your must have list. If you're hiring a financial analyst and you must have an MBA, then you need to stick with that and um, don't let the maybe the halo effect from someone who is really charismatic, get you carried away, or someone who is more influencing and sold you more on how they could do the job. You've got to stick to your absolute, they must have this on the list. And I think core values is one of the must haves. Excuse me. If they don't, the core values of your company, it's ultimately, they're not a keeper. And you've got to figure out what are the questions that you're going to ask to uncover, do they fit the core values of your business? And these are really tricky. And I always refer people to the video that was given by Tony Shea speaking at Stanford Business School, talking about core values and talking about how they infuse them into their hiring process. If you type in core values videos, Tony Shea, HSIEH, I believe,
IEH. Yep.
you will find that video. It's entertaining and it's insightful, both.
Awesome. Awesome. Great resources. I love that you mentioned the look back or look, I guess, look ahead, but look back, right? If I look a year or 2 years or 5 years ahead, is this person someone that can do that? And to your point about the must haves, be really clear on what is a must have and what is a not must have, because I think a lot of people get those confused. I think a lot of people, they think, oh, that'd be nice, when in reality it's a must. To your point about Spanish speaking, right? If 80% of your workforce is Spanish speaking, well, Spanish
Yeah.
speaking is a must. So that's an awesome point. So John, if we're getting started along this whole scale route, you mentioned a playbook and a mentor, probably reading Traction or the E-Myth, understanding some of these core values that we have in the Tony Shea video. I know that your book is, honestly, it's probably a little further along here. Disruptive Successor is really strong for folks that are a little further along. But if they want to start, what's a good practical, tactical thing they can do to start today so that they can be ready to take on a mentor like you to help them?
Are you asking what's a good book for them to read, or
No,
what's a good
no, just a good
practice?
step or two that they might want to take.
Well, I mean, I'll go back to the basics. What I learned in business school is still pretty valuable. Is have a business plan. We talked about that early. Um, you know, you could write a 20, 30, 40 page business plan. Um, the big and most largest business plans were always the ones that failed. The people that came to me decades ago and said, I've done a 100 page business plan, and I'm thinking like, this, there's no way this guy is going to get off the starting block here and dive into the pool. I mean, um, you know, business planning is a function of not getting ready, 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 and then aiming and fire. It's more like aim, ready, fire, or ready, aim, fire, fire. I mean, you've got, in other words, my point is that there's a balance between planning and doing. Um, and, you know, and I'll give you an example. Let's say you're not sure how to price your product. I mean, are you going to spend an enormous amount of time doing market research? Or maybe do you do some market research, um, kind of guesstimate what you think the pricing is, test it with some people, and then, maybe do a soft launch, and then maybe either raise or lower it and test the response rates, at 3 different price levels. You've got to get out in the marketplace, but you've got to also plan. And too many entrepreneurs either do one better than the other, but they don't balance the two. And I think business planning is still something vital. I read a quote the other day. I can't remember who it was by, but it was something to the effect of, business plans are really important, even though most of the time they don't come out to be and you don't follow what they are. But it gives you the discipline of thinking through things that you can then make adjustments. And so I think that any entrepreneur, whether you're one person or 10 people, it's develop a vision document and keep it simple. Keep it under a few pages, high level cliff note type stuff. If you need to sell it to an investor, then obviously need to make it more of a narrative that will tell a story. But if you're just sharing it with the few key people that are in your immediate support network, then it just needs to be something that's in Cliff Notes that you can explain.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I just want to repeat that back. The balance that we need to have is between getting out in the marketplace and pressure testing it, and then doing the right planning, creating that right business plan so that we have it and test and be ready to pivot. I think is really really strong, John. I really like that, and you shared a lot of great stuff today, John. If people want to get more connected with you, if they want to learn more from you, of course, folks, go get a copy of Disruptive Successor. It's a great book. It's easy to read and challenging to implement, so
Yes.
take the time to work through it. Don't just whiz bang check the box and do it. But John, how can they get more connected to you if they've got questions or they want to learn more?
Yeah. So I find that most of my interaction happens either through my website or through LinkedIn. I'm easy to find on LinkedIn, Jonathan Goldhill. You'll also find my book and my company, the Goldhill Group and Disruptive Successor. But my website, thegoldhillgroup.com, really easy to fill out a contact us form. You can schedule a complimentary call with me, and we can talk through the issues or challenges that you're facing, and we can explore whether there's a fit between what I offer and what you need. So,
Awesome. Awesome. Great stuff. Get connected with Jonathan Goldhill on LinkedIn or go to thegoldhillgroup.com and learn more about how disruptive success can be in your future in a family business or otherwise. John, thanks so much for your time today, man. Learned a lot, and I appreciate all of the insights that you shared. Thank you.
Phil, thanks for having me on the show today.